I remembered to hit record. I am way too proud of that basic accomplishment. And I've got my pointer. No, I don't want that pointer. Problem is moving this thing out of the way is always a challenge. All right, so here we go. I repeat all these links at the end, and they are in the ticket that I sent to, it felt like practically everyone in the States, so hopefully you've got all the links you need. And we're talking about depression today. Yay. Which actually is not as much a bummer. It's life, you guys. We gotta face it. Okay, so many of you are interested in getting credit or contact hours, and to give contact hours, I do have to divulge my conflicts of interest or commercial bias. I have 0 conflicts of interest or commercial bias to disclose. So when you do the evaluation and it asks, did I tell you that I have no conflicts? Yes, I did. Did I tell you that my program, which is funded by a grant, has no conflicts? Yes, I did. If you then feel like saying that you did see commercial bias present, by all means, tell me what that was, because I am in year 5 of my 5-year grant, and if there's any commercial bias that I could be tapping into to have funding, that would be lovely. But I don't think you're going to see commercial bias. So let's just start with something to make you type in the chat bot over here. What do you feel like doing when you see kids like this? What's your gut reaction inclination? Anyone, type something. Anything? Okay, well, I'll answer for you, because what people usually say when I get to talk to people in real life is that they want to make them feel better. You know, you want to go up and give them a hug, right? You want to find out what's bothering them and get rid of it so that they can stop looking like this and feel better. Except maybe this one. Raise your hand if you think this one's faking. Anyone? Just a quick aside, the internet is a really creepy place, because I typed in that I just want images of sad children, and this one came up. I took that picture. I don't know how it's on the internet or how it knew to give it to me. It was really kind of creepy. That's Milagros. She was totally faking it, but anyhow, it was funny. She was in Peru. So yes, we do tend to want to, the moment we see a kid crying, rush in to cheer them up, because that's what we automatically do with anyone. If someone is sad, our immediate reaction is, what can I do to cheer you up? And yeah, we gotta stop doing that. We really gotta stop doing that, okay? Because when we rush in to fix these negative emotions, first of all, we're teaching them that negative emotions are something that needs fixing. They're bad. They're wrong. You should not have them. I mean, everyone knows that they're uncomfortable and they're painful, but there's this added layer of they are wrong. And it's right there in our language. You know, we'll come up and say, what's wrong? Rather than, you know, what's upsetting you? What's bothering you? As if, you know, that's just a fact of life. It's more like, what's wrong that needs fixing? It also teaches the kids that there is a fix, that it is possible to find an off switch and just rush in and cheer up. You know, oh, you're feeling bad, let's cheer you up and turn off that negative emotion. And so it makes kids feel like, what's wrong with you that you can't naturally find this button that you just push and it'll make bad feelings go away. And yet that's kind of the American way, believing that there's a button you can push and it makes the bad feelings go away. There's nothing healthy out there that works like that, okay? But the feeling you get is, if you can't get rid of it quickly and effectively, you're doing something wrong. You aren't trying hard enough. You're bothering other people by not accomplishing this task of cheering up for them. You know, if I'm feeling sad and someone comes in and tries to cheer me up and I stay sad, now I feel like I've disappointed them, in addition to already still being sad in the first place. And that's a big part of this. When someone comes and tells you to cheer up, it really conveys this message of, you're kind of bothering me that you're upset now. You know, we've all got that feeling of, oh, well, I shouldn't go there because I just bring everyone down. I'd be a party pooper. You know, I shouldn't be around people unless I could be cheerful. And if I'm upset and someone else is trying to cheer me up, and I know that cheering up is just not an option right now, now I feel responsible for the fact that they are uncomfortable. And so it's kind of this very weird codependency that we train everyone into very early on in their lives, and it persists through our entire life. Okay. And I know that we mean well when we tell someone to cheer up. You know, we just want to make you feel better. And yes, helping people feel better is a good goal if what you're trying to do is help them learn how to be better about feeling things. One part of that is being okay with discomfort, not rushing to turn it off, what we call distress tolerance. The idea that it's okay to not feel 100% hunky-dory, wonderful, peachy keen, fine, happy all the time. You don't have to be banished and go away and get away from everyone because you're bringing down the room. You don't have to fix it. You can just be like, yeah, I'm feeling anxious right now and I'm going to feel anxious. Or I'm feeling sad right now and I'm going to feel sad for a little bit. I can manage it. It's part of life. Okay. We want to help people understand and accept that negative feelings are part of being human. Who's seen the movie Inside Out, the animated one? I love that movie. If you haven't seen it, now's a great time. I'm sure it's on streaming everywhere probably right now. It's a wonderful movie because in addition to just kind of being cool, it emphasizes the idea that negative feelings are actually, they have a role there. They belong there. They aren't just something to be shoved aside, gotten away from, minimized, get rid of it. So what we want to be able to do is help people be okay with negative feelings and be able to tell when is this negative feeling something that is a problem that needs to actually be addressed because it is a symptom of a more significant issue. Same as you don't want to rush to take Tylenol every time you feel a little ache and pain, but you do want to know if that pain you have is a sign of, something that actually needs medical help. So, starting with just this process of how to move through sadness, how to heal from the more minor emotional injury of something making you sad. Step one, feel sad. Go ahead and feel it. Let yourself feel it. Have it be okay to feel it. Lots of people do not feel comfortable with negative emotions. They feel like they're not allowed to have them. Okay. And part of that is that they're worried what will happen when they have them because they don't have a lot of experience with it, and they catastrophize that. I mean, how many people have had kind of a, like, I don't want to cry because if I start crying, I feel like I'll never stop. You ever had that feeling where you are so sad, you're worried that if you start crying, you'll never stop? And that is a feeling we can all relate to. But it's still okay to cry because if that fear was actually true, every human being you meet would be currently crying now because we've all felt that way at some point in the past. Okay, so you should go ahead and feel the emotions and be able to express the emotions in whatever way works for you, whether it's in journaling or in art or in music or in activities or in talking to people. Now, talking to people, of course, involves the other people being there, and it is important to find the right people to talk to. Ideally, people who will not immediately rush in to cheer you up, but people who can listen to you and can listen to what is it that you actually need right now and offer it. Do you want someone who will distract you from what is bothering you? Do you want someone who will just listen to you? Do you want someone who will try to help you change your mood? Or do you want someone who will be with you, accepting that your mood is what it is and it's not going to change right away? Okay. And a big part is practicing mindfulness and grounding. The point of mindfulness is not letting the past or the future completely overwhelm your experience of the present. The way you do this is by drawing your attention to the present moment. And so past things that happened are upsetting and sad, but you want to look at what is going on right now. If you're getting overwhelmed by fear of the future or mourning the past or fear of the past, one way to alleviate that, not make it go away, but to lessen it a little bit, is to bring your mind back to what's going on right now. What do I feel right now? My breath, my physical sensations, and so on. You want to, over time, notice what activities make an emotion stronger and what ones make it weaker. And when is it helpful and when is it hurtful for the emotion to get stronger or to get weaker? Many of us, you feel upset and sad and you do things to squish it down, make it weaker. And you never go ahead and actually feel sad. As opposed to being like, yeah, I've been on the verge of tears for days now. Maybe if I could go and watch that really sad movie and have a good cry, that kind of flush the system and let me move past that verge of tears thing. So sometimes what helps is something that'll actually help you feel it more, not just feel it less. And when you're in the midst of this, you have an injury, you have an emotional injury, and you want to recognize that, as with any minor illness or minor injury, you don't expect yourself to do 100% of everything that you would do if you were fully healthy. So you want to lower your expectations, but not bottom them out to zero. You know, have some expectations, but be okay with not getting 100% of everything done. And each day that you do a little bit more than the day before is progress. And recognizing and honoring and valuing incremental change is vital for all of these things, because there is no off switch. All we've got is the volume knob, and you have to be able to appreciate that. I love this cartoonist. Okay. And one of the nice things about trying to track down the copyrights is I've gotten to actually talk to some of these artists that I adore. I love cartoonists who can't draw, who recognize, yeah, I can't really draw, so I'm going to do this instead. She just had early in her career that she can't draw arms or legs, and so technically the cartoon is called Things Without Arms, Things Without Legs. And it's got lots of good stuff about gender and transgender, and also emotional things and things like depression. And you can actually, if you ask for this, you get a link. I mean, you get a thumbnail of it, but I don't want to be giving it away, even though she offered to send me cards that I could give away, because they make them in note cards, in tote bags and all kinds of things. But I really want people to buy her stuff because it's beautiful. But I love this cartoon because it talks through the way I wish these conversations would go. You know, you start with just up here, I have a sad. We don't say that. You know, what do we say instead? You know, we say, I am sad, as if it is a defining characteristic of who you are as a person. But instead, this is, I have a sad. Like, I have a cold. It's miserable. I can't just wish it away, but it's not forever. And then the other person, instead of immediately saying, hey, let's cheer up, asks what the sad person actually needs. You know, are you looking for solutions, or are you just looking for comfort? And then the sad person responds with a description of there being a process here, not just an on-off switch. I would like to be angry, then sad, then comforted, then adventure for solutions, then giggles. Like, okay, let's start. So I love that modeling of how the process could go instead. Now, we do want to pay attention to if someone's sadness is the visible edge of a larger problem, such as a major depressive disorder. Okay, and what the sort of things you look for are, is the pain out of proportion to the trigger, or there is no trigger. They're just sad. The mood is just there without anything to cause it. They cannot feel happy. You know, now if you've had a horrible loss in your life and you go to a movie and it's not as interesting as it would be if you weren't grieving, that makes sense. But if no matter what's going on in your life, movies aren't funny anymore, food doesn't taste good anymore, that's a sign that your brain chemistry is out of whack, such that you're less able to feel pleasure. Okay. If you are having these sad bouts over and over and over again, frequent recurrence, that's a problem. If it's really, really slow to get better, and that's where we'll talk about complicated grief. And this is again where we're not saying that you're doing something wrong if you don't get over it. For one thing, there's no getting over a loss. It's integrating it and proceeding with life. But if you're having trouble proceeding with life, then we call that complicated grief. And we're not saying you screwed up. We're saying, would you like some treatment, some help to help you get on with your life? If they are actively getting worse, and if it is really significantly impairing their function. Those are all the things that we look for, watching out for someone having something that could be a depressive disorder. Now, when we talk about looking for signs of mental illness, lots of people get really, really, really nervous, you know, among nurses who are not psych nurses. They're like, but but I'm not a psych nurse, and I want to reassure you that we know how to assess generally how bad is something. Is something a little problem? Is something a medium problem? Is something a needs help problem? Is something a chronic problem? We do this all the time, whether you are, an orthopedic nurse or a home, a infectious disease nurse. You still can look and say, I know what these different levels look like, and I know when I need to call someone or refer someone for higher level of care. So like a rolled ankle, the sniffles, feeling sad, those are kind of the same level where, yeah, you can do your daily stuff. You can get on with life, but yeah, you notice it. It gets in the way a little bit. You're not doing it as good. You might still do everything, but you don't do it as good as you would otherwise. Now, a sprained ankle, that's more than just a quick roll. That's kind of like having a cold. That's kind of like grief. This is where if you show up for work, people are like more likely to go, should you be here? Maybe you need to take a few days. Maybe you should go home and get well first, because it's really, really getting in the way of doing anything, or doing what you need to do. A broken ankle and pneumonia are similar to depression. Okay, and at this level, yeah, you really could benefit from help. You probably should see a doctor or a nurse practitioner or someone about this, and not just go home and try to try to heal on your own. You might need medicine. You might not. You might get well without it. You might die without it. So it probably would be a good idea to seek treatment. And then down here are the things that are chronic, that come and go. With major depressive disorder, we've got single episode and then we've got recurrent. Pretty much 2 episodes is enough to draw a line and we call it recurrent. But many people, they have a single episode of depression and that's the only depression they have. But once you've done it twice, that means something in your brain makes it more likely to respond to life stressors with a depressive reaction. Same as something in this person's lungs make them more likely to respond with wheezing in the presence of allergens or infections. And something in this person makes them more likely to have, further injuries. And so this is someone where they might be fine most of the time. They might be taking medicine every day to maintain fine most of the time. And even with or without the medicine, there may be times when they have a flare up, when something happens that makes their disease become more prominent for a while. And then it goes back to being in the background. It's always there, but it's not necessarily always front and center for them. Now, for the diagnostic process, to diagnose, the DSM is our mental health book of diagnoses. And it works kind of like an I-9 form, or maybe a Chinese menu where you get to have, this many things from this column, this many from this column, and so on and so forth. And so the way it spells it out differently for each diagnosis. For depression, what they say is we've got all of these symptoms here. And if you've got 5 or more of them, and they've stuck around for at least 2 weeks, yeah, we're going to call it depression and encourage you to get some treatment for it. Of the 5, the first 2, one of those has to be there. You can't have 5 down here and not feel sad and not have anhedonia and still qualify. Okay, so you look at what we've got. You've got the mood that people tend to think of sad, but there's also just hopelessness, guilt, feeling empty, lack of feeling. Along with the lack of feeling is lack of pleasure, what we call anhedonia. This is where you go to, something funny and it's not really that funny, or food just doesn't taste good. Have you ever been the person who shops for the family and you get a sinus infection and the whole family starves for like a month because when you go to the store, nothing is appetizing. Everything tastes bleh when you've got a sinus infection. Depression is like a sinus infection for your entire life. Everything is bleh. The food is bleh. Interactions are bleh. Funny things are bleh. Anything that normally would feel good is just bleh. Okay. Change in appetite could go in either way. Many people more in the initial stages of significant depression, they start eating more. Many people reach a point where eating becomes completely something they just don't do anymore. And they can lose a lot of weight as well. Change in sleep is the same way. People will tend to view what they've seen. So they'll say, oh yeah, depression, that's when you sleep all the time. Oh, you're not sleeping, therefore you don't have depression. No, it can go either way. You can have hypersomnia where you just cannot wake up, or insomnia where you cannot fall asleep. Okay. Also, physical activity. You can have either psychomotor retardation, everything's slowed down where it looks like they're in a different time zone. Just walking across the room takes longer because they are moving slower. Everyone else looks like hummingbirds in comparison, that you're just flitting around while they're just plodding along. Or it can be agitation, where they cannot sit still, where they're fidgeting all the time. Low energy and fatigue. And with that also comes like physical pain. Aches and pains hurt more. Feeling worthless, guilty, pointless, should go away, no one wants me. Difficulty cognitively, can't concentrate, can't organize your thoughts, can't make decisions, so on. And preoccupation with death. It might be suicidal thoughts. It might be preoccupation with their own death, or it might just be preoccupation with death in general, that's where their mind latches onto, looking at details in the world around them. Now, with all of our mental illnesses, all of our mental health as well, you can look at how the feelings and the behavior and the thoughts all influence each other. Whoops, sorry, I did not mean to go back. I don't know why I did that. And they'll influence each other for good or for bad, okay? So on the feeling side, you've got sadness like we expect, but also things like boredom, that's the anhedonia, anxiety, numbness. The thoughts are disorganization and lots of negative thoughts and lots of self-judgy thoughts and urges to hurt yourself or nightmares. Cognitive distortions, we'll talk about those. So basically the way you're thinking is not 100%. And your behavior, all those things we talked about, of sleep and eat, sleeping and eating, but also just withdrawing, not participating in things, slowing down or being fidgety, and also losing kind of any sense that matters if you get hurt. So lots of risk-taking behavior you might see. Now, a depressive episode can be triggered by taking a hit on any one of these three. You know, someone in your family dies and you feel really sad, and that can feed into negative thoughts and withdrawal, and it starts cycling and you become more depressed. Or it can be that something cognitively happens to you. You know, you fail a class or something like that makes you feel stupid, and then that starts cycling into that. Or something physical can happen. You have chronic pain. If you've ever had a toothache, if you keep your toothache for a month or two, that can cause depression, because you've got this pain that you just cannot get away from, and it's always there, and that can drag the whole system down. Now, I mentioned cognitive distortions. What we're talking about with cognitive distortions are thinking in ways that are not the most rational. I mean, it's not irrational, like irrational, but we all do this when we're stressed. I mean, look through this list and you can tick off how many of them you've probably done this week, because we are all so stressed about everything, okay? Overgeneralization, that's where everything is either terrible or good. Usually you're stressed, so it's usually everything sucks. Personalization, this is out to get me. This is going to specifically hurt me, and therefore that person must have done it, at the very least with callous disregard for how it's going to impact me. And maybe they did it specifically to bother me. Catastrophizing, I can't see any path to this getting better. It's all downhill, no brakes, things are going to be awful. Magnifying and minimizing, this is where the bad gets huge and the good gets puny. You know, where it'll be, oh, I failed that test, I'm going to fail out of school. Yeah, but you got an A in the other class last week. Oh, well, that's a gut class. Everyone gets an A in that. That doesn't count. That sort of thing. Black and white thinking. This is one of my go-tos, is the black and white thinking of just, it's either this or that. Either you are completely with me or you must be totally against me. This has to work perfectly or it's a complete failure. That's our all or nothing thinking. Discounting the positive, like I said, and minimizing them there. Equating opinions and facts. Been seeing that lately, anyone? The fallacy of fairness. This is one where but it's not fair, I shouldn't have to do this. And therefore they shut down and won't proceed, because until the universe lines up and makes everything fair, they won't do it. as opposed to getting that, yeah, it doesn't have to be fair, it just has to be functional. And the control fallacy is the idea that, yeah, I can fix this. I have power to control this and fix this. Therefore, when it doesn't work, I beat myself up for it. So these are, as I said, very common to all of us when we're stressed. They're really, really common with adolescents. I mean, when you look through that list, does that not just seem like baseline for adolescents? You know, adolescents are always, you know, life is out to get me, or, you know, oh, I got to on my exam, oh, the world is over. You know, semi-logical links, but frequently they can just go from there to there without even stopping along the way. You know, today I feel like, oh yeah, every day I feel terrible, and so on. And so you look and say, okay, so how do we tell if a teenager has depression or a younger kid, or if they just have, you know, puberty? Well, what you're looking for is change, okay? And there are a number of assessment tools that you can use that will help. Some of them are very much broken out by age. And so if you're dealing with younger kids, you get the complete set and you can look for the ones that are aimed more, the questions are phrased more for the younger people. But you're looking for a change in function, okay? So things that we're used to looking for, like dropping grades. Their grades are dropping. Right now, a little bit hard to assess that, huh? So it's hard. I mean, right now, I can't really incorporate COVID into my mind, let alone my presentations, but we can recognize how much harder all of this is to figure out in the current situation. But you look for, have their grades been dropping? Have they lost interest in activities? And this one you got to watch out, because sometimes kids have been, you know, the parents will be like, oh, they love soccer. They've been playing it since they were 5. And now that they're 12, they suddenly don't want to be on the soccer team. And sometimes what's going on is that when they reach 12, they realize that they don't actually have to do soccer. Soccer's just always been a fixture in their lives. And it turns out their parents might have been more invested in them loving soccer than their actual love for it. And so if someone's dropped out of something that they always did, the immediate question is, well, what are they doing now? So if it's, yeah, they don't do soccer anymore, it's awful. Yeah, all they want to do is paint. Say, okay, that's just a shift, that now they are interested in something else. That's fine. It's when they have no interest in activities, nothing is worth doing. That's the warning sign. Similarly, friends, you want to, you know, if they're not hanging out with their friends anymore, if they've lost all their friends, which again can be, I've been friends with you because we grew up together, and now I kind of realize that I don't actually have anything in common with this person, and I'd rather hang out with those people. So it could be that, yeah, Mom, I'm not playing with my cousins as much as I used to. You love them, but they're just people to me. I'd rather hang out with my friends. That can be a normal shift. You do want to check out the new set of friends, though, because if it's that, you know, in adolescence and, you know, early adolescence, transitional and adolescence is when kids are starting to look for, who do they connect with? Who is their community that they fit with? And so whatever new friends they're finding are kind of a reflection of their internal assessment of who they are as a person. So if it's, yeah, they've got a whole new set of friends now, and all of them seem to wear long sleeves and be hiding cuts and are using lots of drugs and not going to school at all, that is worth noticing as potentially a problem. You look for impairment, because that's key to diagnosis, is impairment. So are they doing badly in school and in extracurriculars and in socials? But one real hallmark thing to watch for is, are they like not showering anymore? Now I know, depending on the age and to some extent the gender, sorry guys, showering might not have been high on their agenda in the first place. But if it really is, they're letting themselves go in a way that they never did before, that is a real red flag, especially for teenagers, because they are so focused on how they might be perceived. And then whatever's going on, you know, everyone has times when they're upset and so on. How persistent is it? Is it pretty much every day and at least 2 weeks? Then we want to, you know, worry about it. And remember, it's not just feeling sad. Sometimes it's just feeling empty, feeling blah. So I want to do just a little bit of neurology. Don't want to get too much in the weeds of the neurons, and so I kept it with smiley faces to make it simple. Okay. What I normally would do is just have like two rectangles and say, this is a picture of a brain, really close up. Okay, so you've got two cells here, and this one's happy and this one's not. And so it communicates happy by squirting out neurotransmitters that communicate from one cell to the next, time to feel good. It's not always time to feel good. Something bad happens, ain't nobody happy, nobody is squirting the feel-good chemicals around. So the brain is not a stupid organ. The brain is very much a use it or lose it kind of place. And so if you're not using much serotonin, the brain goes, yeah, we don't need it anymore. Let's make less. And so it downregulates the production of serotonin during the time when you are grieving a loss or dealing with a job loss or dealing with having failed a test or dealing with having moved to a new place and you have no friends, whatever is going on. So events knock you down, and your brain doesn't make as much of the serotonin and norepinephrine and other brain chemicals, okay? Now, once you're kind of ready to move on with life, you go out to do something and you don't have the neurochemistry to enjoy it, okay? So it's like, man, death in the family, my mom died and I was grieving, and now it's spring, and gardening always cheers me up. So I'm going to go out and garden and see if that doesn't help me get over this, because we have this idea of getting over it. And I go out and I start gardening, and it doesn't feel good. In the initial stage, I just don't have the serotonin to enjoy it. And so I got a choice now. I might just say, yeah, not really doing it for me, but I bet I'll appreciate the flowers when they bloom. So I'm going to stay out here and keep doing it, even though I'm not getting the payback that I was hoping for. If I keep doing it, this cell spat out all the serotonin it had. It wasn't really enough to cheer up this cell. But since it's empty now, the brain goes, we're having a run on serotonin. We should crank up production of it. And it starts increasing the production. If, on the other hand, I say, yeah, gardening sucks, I'm going back to bed, I don't use up the serotonin I have. The brain doesn't get the memo that it should start making more, and I can stay in this depressive state indefinitely. That's where you get the people who say, all you need to do when you're depressed is go out and exercise. Go out and do this. You only just need to do this. That is a person with a healthy brain expecting a person with a depressed brain to be able to just tell their brain to be a healthy brain, okay? Because if you do, go ahead and do it, and your brain is healthy, it increases production, and within a few weeks, you go back to your normal baseline of regular life, okay? If your brain is predisposed to depression, it can take a lot longer for the serotonin to come back. So we're not talking about, just keep gardening and by the end of the hour, it will start to feel good. It's more like, yeah, just keep gardening and, it might never feel good, but just keep doing it anyway. That it might take forever, or it might really never get up to cheerful levels of serotonin. At the same time, you've got other changes that have happened in your brain. The pain centers have gotten a lot more active and a lot more robust, so that everything hurts more. Emotional and physical pain hurts more. And your memory and emotional regulating centers actually physically shrink. That's why the medications take so long to work, because there's some major restructuring that needs to happen before you start to feel different. So the treatment for depression is multi-focused. It is focused on all three sides of this triangle that we talked about. And not just on this one. This one, changing the feelings, it's a neurochemical thing. It's getting more serotonin up there, which can come some from the behavior and the thoughts, of behaviorally milking that brain dry so that it makes more. But also that's where medications come in, is giving you medications to help maximize the serotonin you have and encourage it to make more, okay? That's only one side of the three. So people who think all you need to do is take this pill and you'll be better, no, you're missing 2/3 of the solution, or not solution, but of the treatment, okay? That's why I really get annoyed when people refer to antidepressants as their happy pills, because no, doesn't work that way. You also want to be addressing your thoughts, being able to say, this is a temporary state. Yes, it hurts. Not what's wrong with me that I'm in pain, but yeah, I'm in pain, and that's okay. It will go away. I'm still a good person. I'm still worth being around. I still should get out there and do things. And then it's making yourself go out and do things, not waiting for it to feel good first. And be around people. Be socially active in the sense of being in the physical presence of people. You don't have to talk, you don't have to interact, but just being around people will help more than being off by yourself. Okay. So what we want to do, spelled out down here, encourage activity, physical and social, without requiring them to cheer up. That's like saying you have to be all better before you can do the thing that will help you get better. Okay. Some structure to the day, especially the beginning of the day. And this is something that we're all seeing a lot of with the COVID, is that if you don't gotta get up, at first it's kind of vacation, and then after a while, I don't have to get up, easily bleeds into there's no reason to get out of bed, no purpose in getting up, and that's depression. So you need to get out of bed, find some reason to get out of bed. That's why people who have, especially dogs, do better, because if you don't let the dog out in the morning, you're going to have crap to clean up later. And so it gets you physically up out of the bed to let the dog out. And then you might end up going back to bed, but it's at least a start. You might be able to resist going back to bed. Okay. And you want to have the ADLs, hygiene, and so on, be something that the person, is trying to also do as part of the beginning of the day. So pretty much you just say, okay, start your day, get up at a reasonable hour. You don't have to get up at 5 a.m., but ideally single digits. And start the day with, I'm going to do this and this and this. After that, I can figure it out. But I'm going to get up and I'm going to take my meds, take a shower, get dressed, and then figure it out. If they live in a world where you have appointments, remember that world? It's good to make the appointments in the morning so that they have to get up to be able to get to the appointments. Medications are also helpful for that, because, as I said, they directly are addressing the serotonin on there. And then there's also emotional support. Now, what therapy does, a therapist, and the purpose of a therapist is to help the person with the decisions around these things, okay? Challenging the distorted thoughts, being able to, I say, with a therapist, you start off, you want to like the therapist, and then once you like them, you get committed to going so that they can proceed to piss you off, and you sometimes hate them because they should call you out on your shit. They should point out, hey, you're seeing things very black and white today. What's another way of viewing this, okay? You want to hope that they might teach the person coping skills, coping strategies, behaviors that they can do that will help them feel better, self-soothing things, and also a lot of communication, interpersonal effectiveness, how to communicate your needs to the people around you, which is an uphill battle when you are feeling worthless and feel like your needs should not count at all. How to, first of all, accept that you are allowed to have emotions and allowed to have needs, and that your needs are real, and then how to communicate them to other people. People with cognitive distortions, frequently when you're depressed, go straight from, I have no needs, to, okay, I've got needs, and that person is refusing to meet them because you do the mind reading. That's another cognitive distortion that I love, is the mind reading one, where you assume everyone knows what you know, and therefore they ought to be proactively meeting your needs without you telling them that. So that's what a therapist's role is, okay? There's various tools that they would be bringing to bear. You are not going to be therapists for the kids or for your spouses and so on, but it's always good to know what these things are. Remember, therapy happens for like 45 minutes once a week. Life happens all the time. And so it's really handy if the people around you can know what you're working on. First of all, know that you're working really hard on something, and that might be why you're having a hard time focusing on other things as thoroughly, but also that they can remind you of what some of your coping strategies might be, and so on. Therapy tends to have homework, where it's, okay, now during this week you should be doing this. And if you are working with someone who's in therapy and they're comfortable sharing, it's good to say, okay, so what's your homework so that I can help support you in remembering to do it. What we are doing more directly ourselves is the emotional support side, where we might not be doing the steps of therapy other than just, if we know about them, reinforcing them, but knowing how to be supportive, which is really hard because we've all been acculturated to the idea that the supportive thing to do is to say, cheer up, I'm going to help you cheer up. And when you go to visit someone with depression, my goal is that they will be happy when I leave, which is stupid. I mean, if you visit someone with cancer, do you think that they're going to be in remission by the time you leave at the end of the day? Do you feel like a failure if when you leave the person who's got pneumonia, they're still wheezing? No, you feel like it was still worth going there. It was still a good thing you did. And of course, they're still sick because they've got a chronic illness. But when you visit someone with depression, first of all, they probably were comfortable to tell you they had depression. But if you know that you're visiting someone with depression, people have this ridiculous idea that the goal of the visit is to cure them. And that if they do not succeed in being cured for you, you're a failure, and they feel guilty about failing you by not cheering up. So we want to really recognize that emotional support is not about cheering the person up. Because most of the things you say to cheer a person up is basically to say, you seem really depressed. Hey, I've got an idea. Have you considered not being depressed? Because that's pretty much what things boil down to when people are saying like, hey, buck up, hey, cheer up, hey, other people have it worse than you. Oh, yeah, that's going to be helpful. Now I feel guilty for feeling sad. Instead, I love some of these posters I've found, like this, that you saying you are working your butt off just getting out of bed every morning. And that is really impressive. And I am so, so proud of the work you're putting into this. Or just having someone who says, yeah, you're not terrible. Just saying, I am here and I love you. Not, I'm going to fix you. Okay. This quote down here is my favorite quote in the world. And it comes from my favorite description of depression anywhere. Again, you can see I love cartoonists who cannot draw. This is by Ali Broche. She has a blog that you could look up. So you could go ahead and read this online this afternoon if you wanted to. It's called Hyperbole and a Half. And she writes about all kinds of things in her life. Lots of stuff about dogs. If you love dogs, you might also really love her blog. But then there was a period of time when she stopped blogging for a long time. And people are like, what happened? What's going on? And when she came back, she wrote a 2-part thing that if you just go to Hyperbole and a Half and you do the search for depression, part 1 and part 2, she explains that she'd stopped because she went into a very severe depression. And she then proceeds to, chronicle that. And it is the most amazing description of what depression is like and the process of healing from it. Because the thing is, when a person finds their way out of depression, way too often they join the masses in saying, all you need to do is just do what I did. She doesn't do that, which I love. The fact that she gets that rushing in to say, hey, no, I'm not like those people who think there's an easy fix. I'm someone who's had depression. Let me give you an easy fix. She's not one of those, which is what so many people do. And then there's this wonderful section she talks about of when you're depressed and people know about it, the things people say are so unhelpful. And she said, it's like all your fish died. And you're sad because your fish died. And everyone around you is saying really stupid things like, oh, you used to have so many fish, what happened? Or oh, hey, we could do this with your dead fish. Or, oh, why not just make them be alive again? Or how about something else? And what you're feeling like saying to them is, do you not get that nothing you're saying at all addresses the fact that my fish are dead? And down here, she sums it up and says the problem might not even have a solution. You're not looking for solutions. Maybe just looking for someone to say, hey, I'm sorry your fish died. Or, wow, those fish are super dead, but I still like you though. Because that's the key thing in depression, is feeling like when you're depressed, no one wants to be around you. No one should want to be around you. I can't do anything. I am toxic. Being in the same room with me is going to inflict pain on the people around me that I care about. Therefore, the best thing I can do for anyone is to spare them the pain of my presence. And when that sticks around long enough and sinks in deep enough and feels permanent enough, that is the key the core of suicidality, that and wanting to make the pain stop. So being able to say to someone, hey, I want to be around you, even while you're depressed. You don't have to be cheerful to be around, for me to want to be here. We can just sit here and you can be silent the whole time. You can be crying the whole time. And I still want to be here. I'm sad that you're hurt. I'm sad that you're in pain, but I still want to be here. And now for something completely different, the happy pills. No, they're not happy pills. Okay, one thing to remember about meds, for people who aren't familiar with meds, is that there are meds that work very slowly and gradually, and meds that work fairly immediately. Okay, like Tylenol. You have a headache, you take Tylenol, half an hour later, if it works, you don't have a headache anymore. That's what we call PRN, as needed use. Okay, with antidepressants, it doesn't work that way. You know, it's more like if you had to take Tylenol every single day to eventually get rid of your headache and keep you from getting new ones, which some people have to do that with some meds for migraines and so on. But there is no PRN version of an antidepressant. Well, I mean, there's ecstasy, but you really shouldn't take it, because the way it works is it takes the cells that are making the serotonin and it explodes them. So your brain is flooded with the serotonin and you feel great, but those suckers don't grow back. And as you see from the meds, all we can do is maximize the serotonin you have. If you have caused the brain damage of destroying the cells that make it, you might feel great in your 20s, but you will grow into an untreatable depression in your later adulthood. So there are many kinds of antidepressants out there. All of them share this, where they are taken every single day, and it's going to take a solid 4 to 6 weeks to take effect, if it works. And if it doesn't work, then we get to start over at square one again and wait another 4 to 6 weeks to see if the next one takes effect. It's kind of annoying. Now, some people worry a lot about whether something is off-label. Okay, is it for kids or not? You go and you Google it, and it says not for people under 18. That is because the FDA approves stuff after extensive studies are done, and parents do not sign their kids up to be guinea pigs that often, and so we don't have a lot of pediatric studies of these meds. So instead, we've got standards of care that run frequently 10 or more years ahead of FDA approval. So if there's a kid who's on a med and you look it up and it says, "Ooh, this is not for kids," then that's something to give me a call and say, "Hey, is this typical? Is this a normal thing to give a kid, or is this something that's really kind of, you should question?" And I can let you know what the current standards are. Okay. So originally we had these two kinds, and I think I can make them change colors. Yes, the tricyclics are those guys. Okay. The problem with tricyclics is that they take 4 to 6 weeks to take effect. You take just a little bit too many of them, and you can kill yourself with an overdose. You know, so it's a very narrow, safe dose range. And so doctors were really understandably uncomfortable with the idea of, I've got this depressed person, they're going to stay depressed for another month, and meanwhile I'm prescribing them a bottle of suicide. Made them a little bit uncomfortable. But then we also had, where the MAOIs didn't light up. The MAO, that's because I don't have any MAOIs listed here, so we'll come back to that. The MAOIs I don't have listed up here because we never give MAOIs to kids. MAOIs, it's monoamine oxidase inhibitor. Monoamine oxidase is, okay, this cell is spitting serotonin at that cell. Some of it goes kind of wild all over the place, okay? The monoamine oxidase cleans that up. So if you inhibit that, it doesn't clean it up. It doesn't break it down. The serotonin stays drifting around and is more likely to eventually get there. And so it can, work that way. Makes sense. The problem is it interacts with any stimulating meds. So if the person is taking Ritalin, if the person is taking another antidepressant, if the person is taking Sudafed, possibly really high doses of caffeine, can cause a heart attack and you die. So, and there's certain foods that do the same thing. Basically foods that taste good, anything fermented. So aged cheese, aged meat, wine, beer, all can cause a fatal heart attack if you're taking this med. By the way, St. John's wort is an MAOI. So people who think that herbal things are totally benign, the only thing that's keeping them from dropping like flies is the fact that the herbal dose is probably such a low dose that it's doing nothing. But if you take enough of it, you could end up with this problem. And so again, doctors were really hesitant to prescribe either of these, because this one you can just OD from the bottle. This one you can kill yourself with a nice wine and cheese plate. And so it was much easier for doctors well through into the 80s to just kind of join the rest of society and say, oh, come on, just cheer up. Go out and exercise some more. It's really more of a character flaw than a mental illness. And then Prozac was invented, the first of the SSRIs. Oh, and there was much rejoicing because finally we had something that was reasonably effective and which is really quite hard to overdose on. So it was safe to give and pretty effective. Now it is a selective, meaning it focuses exclusively on serotonin reuptake, which is the same sort of thing, only it's sort of a recycling program where this cell spits out serotonin and immediately also spits out little things. They'll scoop up the extra serotonin and bring it back to reuse. If you stop scooping it back up, maybe it eventually gets to the other cell. Even if it goes lost and never shows up, this cell doesn't get it back. This cell has to make more, so it will ramp up production. So that's how those work, okay? These are the most common. As I said, there's Prozac, and then there's Zoloft, son of Prozac, and then there's Celexa, daughter of Zoloft, and then we got into Lexapro, great-grandchild of Prozac of unknown gender. The reason why these keep coming out is that there's slight tweaks on the formula, and ideally it is increasing the effectiveness and decreasing the side effects on it, okay? That is the main reason. Well, no, the main reason for coming up with new ones is because every 7 years you lose your the legal thing where you get to have it. I'm forgetting a legal term. Anyhow, it can go generic and anyone can sell it. And so if you want to make more money, you have to come up with a new one that you can then keep just for yourself for 7 years. And then it goes generic and then you come up with a new one. So in theory, whatever is the newest one out there that is generic, which is now this one, so there should be another one coming down the pike any second now, should be the most effective with the lowest side effects. The problem is your brain is your brain. The brain is the most complicated organ in the universe, and it's complicated to treat it. So while statistically this one might do that as far as most effective and least side effects, there's plenty of people who get side effects off of this one and do great on Prozac. So you just kind of give it a try, see how it goes. If it goes well, great. If it doesn't go well, you move on to something else. If you get two in the same class that are having the same side effect, then you might give up on the whole class, okay? So there are others out there. There's, these are the SNRIs, serotonin and norepinephrine. There's also NDR, let's see, do I have colors for all these other ones? Yeah, the NDRIs, which is has dopamine also being activated in that. Wellbutrin's got that, so that also makes it useful for ADHD. And then there's other antidepressants that they just call atypical because they got other structures to them. And then there's lots of other things that aren't antidepressants. Like this is a mixture of Zyprexa with Prozac, and this is Abilify. Now these are ones that people get nervous when you tell them, they say, what is that? And you're like, oh, it's an antipsychotic. What? Okay, it's an antipsychotic. Patent. Thank you, all the people who told me the word. Yes, don't you hate it when there's a word on the tip of your tongue? Okay, thank you. Yes, goes off patent. Anyway, so Abilify and Zyprexa are antipsychotics, which make people be like, what, you're saying I'm crazy? It's like, no. Psychosis is your brain's ability to process thoughts. When it's really off kilter, that's when you might have hallucinations or florid delusions. At a lesser stage, it's just the negative thoughts won't go away. So your mood is mostly better, but one bad thing happens, your day is toast because you can't let go of it. It's like trying to put down a thistle when you're wearing mittens. It just won't let go of you. And so you add just a low dose of Abilify in to whatever antidepressant helped with the mood, and it makes that thought easier to let go of. You still have it. It's not like changing your thoughts. The bad thing happens, you feel sad, and then you move on with life. You don't get totally derailed by it. And Lamictal is actually a mood stabilizer, well, actually anti-convulsant, but it's a mood stabilizer that is good for depression. Most mood stabilizers, you have to catch them when they're manic in a bipolar phase. this one, you can catch them when they're depressed, or they might not even be bipolar. It can help with the depression side of it. Okay. Now, all of these are taken just once a day, and again, they will have wacky polar opposite side effects. You look it up and it'll say, okay, side effect of insomnia and side effect of sedation. And I'll be like, how does that work? Okay, it doesn't happen in the same person. So some people might get insomnia. Some people might get agitated. Most people, neither happens. So when I'm prescribing these, I say, take it when it's convenient, okay? If you're going to remember it in the morning, take it in the morning. Bedtime better for you, take it at bedtime, whatever. If the time you took it turns out to feel like a problem, you're taking it in the morning and you're feeling tired all day, switch it to bedtime. Taking it at bedtime and now you can't fall asleep at night, switch it to the morning. But most people, it doesn't really do either. And when people always want to know whether things will make you gain weight. Again, some people gain weight, some people lose weight. It comes out statistically a wash. But the thing that people really do ask about appropriately is the fact that, what's this little black box on this mean? Okay, black box warning is when FDA puts a flag on every prescription saying, oh, by the way, just want to let you know, this med could kill you. It's a polite thing for them to let you know. Now, the reason why this came about is because they did a meta-analysis. That's where they go and they look at lots of studies, and they found that while many studies showed nothing, enough studies showed an increase in suicidal thoughts and actions only among those under 24 for them to decide that that is a key risk factor around the prescribing of antidepressants to children and teens and young adults. Now, if you remember these three sides, you got the physical symptoms, the cognitive symptoms, and the mood symptoms on the triangle. This increase in suicidal thoughts and actions is not exclusively experienced by the younger people. It can happen to anyone. And when it is very mild, it can actually be a sign that the med is working. Because when the med starts to work, it tends to work on the mood, it starts to work on the physical and the mind first, and the mood last. So it might be that you always have suicidal thoughts, but you had no energy. It was just too much work to do any of it. And now you've got the energy, but you still feel hopeless. Or it could be that, yeah, you never even had suicidal thoughts, but you also couldn't really get organized enough to make your own breakfast. And now your cognition and your ability to plan and think things through has come back, but your mood is still awful and your brain's going, ooh, I work again. Hey, let's solve that problem. Have you considered suicide? And so that's where that comes from, is that if these two start before this starts, it can lead to that. And if they are fairly wispy passing thoughts and the person has a very firm grasp of, if I think this, I'm going to call for help and not act on it, they can go away within a week or two and the med starts working. But if they are strong, you don't stay on that med. Okay, so you have to tell people about this. You have to let people know, because otherwise they feel like, okay, I tried to fix this and now I'm even worse than I was before. There is no hope, there is no help. I might as well just go die now. So you need to give them a heads up that this could happen. And if it does, we take the med away and it stops happening. There is a path out of that if you get that side effect, okay? The reason why it showed up more in youth is because they're youth. They are impulsive. They don't tend to think as much about consequences of their actions as other people do. Many do, but not as often. They aren't as in touch with the reality of the situation. You'll have the kids who are saying, I can't wait to see who shows up for my funeral and who's crying. And you kind of want to gently remind them that they don't actually get to go to their funeral. So so that's why it showed up more in the youth. Overall, it was a very, very, very rare event, a minimal risk, okay? Many studies showed none at all, but the black box happened, and the moment the black box happened, prescriptions for this went off a cliff. People stopped prescribing antidepressants for kids and teens because it looked extremely hazardous to do so. What they didn't realize or really think through is that right as soon as they stopped giving antidepressants, the suicide rates started going back up. They had been dropping ever since we started prescribing the antidepressants, and then they started going back up again. Okay, and one statement just about meds in general, and I'm not meds only. You know, if a person has good therapy going and good behavioral things going, then meds may not be something that they necessarily need, but meds can be helpful. And people who are like, oh, well, should we be putting chemicals into this growing brain? You want to recognize the brain, yes, it's a growing brain. It is always a growing brain. It's a very plastic organ. It restructures itself around whatever is going on. What's going on right now in that brain is depression. And the brain is restructuring itself into a depression machine. And the person's identity is forming around the idea of their depression. Because when you're depressed, it's not, I feel this way, it is a reality that I am ugly, that I am stupid, that nobody likes me, that people shouldn't want to be around me. And they might ride through that and come out the other end intact, but they also might come out the other end intact, but with very low standards for relationships. Kind of a, well, beggars can't be choosers. I'm lucky to have anyone willing to want me for a partner. Those sorts of things can pervade the person's identity for the rest of their life if it's left to run them up for too long. So just to as you're weighing the pros and cons, want to recognize that that is something to add into the calculation when you're making the decision. Now, suicide risk factors, because with kids being so impulsive, we do want to pay attention to what sort of things would make us more worried about suicide with any given kid. Okay, the highlighted ones and the bolded and italicized ones are ones that are especially problematic for kids. Okay, having family or friends or peers that have a history of suicide is a big red flag, because one of the big things, I mean, if you asked people and they were completely honest, have you ever thought about suicide? You would probably get a very large majority of the population, but considered doing it, much lower number. Okay, because thinking about it is one thing, doing it is crossing a taboo. You just don't do that. That is not something that is done unless you live in a family or a community where, yeah, sometimes they do that. That breaks that taboo and thus makes one of the things that holds you back not there anymore. Romanticized portrayals are a real problem. And raise your hand if you watched 13 Reasons Why. Yeah, it's a horror show. I'll talk about more if people want to in questions, because if I start talking about it now, I will take up the rest of the time. I'm complaining about what an absolute debacle that show is, and how it, within weeks, we had copycat suicide attempts showing up on the units. But moving on, if they've got a history of trauma or abuse, if they've got a history of self-injury, history of suicide attempts, definitely, and history of self-injury, these are kind of separate things, and I do have a thing you can request by number 20, that helps you separate out self-injury from suicidal behavior and get it. They can have both, is what I'm saying. You can have a person who's self-injurious and not suicidal. You can have a person who is both. Self-injury is not necessarily suicide light. And I am doing the presentation about self-injury a week from Friday. So if you want to see a whole presentation about that, that's there. Bullying, being a bully, or being bullied, both have increased risks of suicide. And cyberbullying has a huge toxic level, because when you're being cyberbullied, you're more likely to not even tell anyone that you're being bullied. These are the kids who will complete a suicide without even ever asking for help, because when you're carrying the bully around in your pocket, it doesn't feel like help is even possible. Substance abuse, frequently, because that really reduces your inhibitions so that you're more likely to act on things as well. Feeling rejected, strained relationships. This one is high, but going down as LGBTQ rights get more recognized, but it's still very, very high. And this Friday, I'm doing the LGBTQ presentation. Access to means, e.g. having guns in the home, makes it more likely. And then down here, if they've got a mood disorder or anxiety or psychotic disorder, obviously, but also notice if they've got chronic illness, if they've got chronic illness and pain, this is where you really want to pay attention. When you've got a kid who's got a chronic medical illness and the parents rush to dismiss them the moment there's any blip of symptoms in it, you really want to have a very serious conversation with the parents about the fact that if the kid believes, perhaps even truly, that they will always have this illness, and the message they get from you is that you can't function at all if you have any symptoms, at some point they start to think, that means I will never have a job, I will never be able to take care of kids, I'll never be able to have a life because all I've got is this illness. And that leaves them with a hopelessness that can lead to depression and or suicidality. So yet another reason to not rush to dismiss kids, even when they've got a medical illness. And recent loss, grieving. So how to assess for suicide? First thing is, it's okay to ask. People are terrified of asking about this. They think that they're going to somehow plant the idea in the head. And really the only way that would happen is if you, it's not like you say, you're really depressed. Well, have you considered suicide? That's not the way you ask, nor would anyone. So don't worry about that. What instead you're doing is you're taking someone who might be plagued by these thoughts. And it's an additional stress, an additional pain that they're struggling with, is feeling like they've got these thoughts. They do not like these thoughts. They do not want to have these thoughts. And there's no one they can tell to be able to try and work on getting rid of these thoughts because it's so taboo to even think it. That when you ask, it helps. It helps them recognize that, oh, it's okay for me to have these thoughts and have someone to talk about. It's part of the situation that I am working on getting through, okay? I personally like to cast a wide net. I like to say, have you ever, because if you say right now, do you feel like killing yourself? If the kid felt like it 5 minutes ago and they know they'll feel like it in an hour, but right now they're good, that gives them a chance to say no. And what kids will do is they will look for any loophole to say no, while at the same time, because of the cognitive distortions, feel like you should have heard the yes. And the fact that you accept the no means you didn't want to hear it. And therefore, you're brushing them off. So you have to really make it that there's no loophole for them to say no to. So have you ever had feelings of hurting or killing yourself? So if it's that, I've thought about, driving my car into a ravine and maybe I'd survive that. So that's not really thinking about killing myself. You want to make sure that you've got hurting in there and ever in there. In my opinion, other people will differ with that. If they say yes to that, then you start asking follow-up questions, starting with what do you feel like doing? You want to know, when do they feel this? How long ago did they last feel this? How often do they feel this? How strong are the feelings? How long do the feelings last? And what do they do to move away from the feelings? And things that you'd watch out for that are very bad are, if it is very current, if it's, 2 years ago, I thought about it, but now I'm depressed again, but I haven't thought about it. You're not as worried about that kid, okay? If it is specific, if they have details, that means they're mentally rehearsing it, which is breaking down that taboo and getting them ready to potentially act on it. If they have a plan of this is what I would do, then do they have access to that? Then those are all big red flags. If you've got someone who's got a specific plan and it's at home, you're not letting them go home, okay? Things that would be more reassuring would be if it is very sporadic or rare, and if they feel very, very much no intent. But I would never do that, because the moment that thought comes to me, I immediately remind myself how much my parents would be devastated by that, or anything like that. So you look at what are their protective factors. One of them is future vision. If you don't see future vision, you're worried, okay? If you can't get the kid to chat about what they're doing this weekend, you kind of wonder, what are they planning before this weekend that makes them not have any thoughts about what they're doing this weekend? It could be that their life is just kind of empty, But if it's that, you know, everyone is doing something and they're very vague about whether they're going to show up for it, that's something. As opposed to the person who might be very often depressed, but also very often immediately talking about when they go to college and when they do this, especially if what their future vision is an escape from, like a tangible, realistic escape from their current pain. You know, if it's, yes, I hate this school, I can't wait to go to a college where I get to study stuff I want. Or yeah, I cannot wait to move out of my house with where my drunken father lives. If they've got a future plan, then that is comforting. Other protective factors can be any connection to people. So connection to family, connection to friends, thinking that these people will miss them and be devastated. Religious connections, including religious beliefs that might be a big barrier. You know, if you've got a kid who's saying they're going, well, I really want to kill myself, but I don't want to go to hell, and I know that God sends you to hell if you commit suicide, that's not a time to raise the possibility that, well, you know, there's many philosophies where God is more forgiving than that. No, you say, yeah, good point. You don't want to do that. So anything they'll hold on. Safety contract is the practice of saying, okay, I want you to spell out for me when you have these thoughts, what you will do to stay safe. You know, so if you feel like hurting yourself, who are you going to call? Write down their phone number. And if they can't answer, who are you going to call next? And write down, and step by step, who will you call if you have these thoughts? Who can help you? Ending with, and if no one's home, 911 is always home. Now, there are people who say safety contract is stupid, it doesn't work. Of course, these are the same people who say a safety contract is stupid because if they're under 18, they can't legally sign a contract. That would be people who think that we're talking about a legal contract here, okay? We're not talking about a legal contract. What we're talking about is you want them, if they've been mentally rehearsing the suicide, you want them to mentally rehearse the safety actions. You want them to mentally rehearse the alternative actions when they have those thoughts. And nothing says mental rehearsal like you've got to write it all down. And then you have them sign it and you sign it just as kind of a look, this is real. I was here, we had this conversation. You know, one last little sliver of safety might be that the kid doesn't want their last act on earth to be that they lied to you. You know, if it's, gee, I promised that person that I would call them first. That might be something that pulls them back from the brink. Anything that pulls them back from the brink is what you want. And now ambivalence is a big thing to keep you alive. Ambivalence is not, I don't care, okay? Ambivalence is, I care very strongly about polar opposites that are mutually incompatible. I really, really want to live, but I really, really want this unending pain to stop. I want them both. I want to live and I want to die, and it hurts to want two things like that at the same time, to be pulled back and forth and back and forth. That's what you see of the person struggling, is that pulling back and forth and back and forth. So that's why down here, one of the biggest red flags is when all of a sudden they're happy. Very abruptly, they're calm, they're serene, they look content, they're at peace, everything's fine now. Okay, they are torn between I want to live and I want to die. I want to live to win. And hopefully, and for most people, it ultimately does, but it's a very slow, gradual win. It's not a light switch that all of a sudden they want to live and they're fine. When I want to die wins, that one can be very abrupt. So if they very abruptly are not struggling anymore, almost certainly it's because I want to die has won that tug of war, and they can deal with their pain today because they know it's only for another day or two, and then they're going to tangibly do that. You may also see things like giving away items. You know, the reason why they're not doing it the moment they decide it is that they want to tie up loose ends. They're going around and saying goodbye to people and giving things away. And it might not be that they come up and say, hi, goodbye, but it might be that they seem to really be going around and wrapping up emotional loose ends. So those are big red flags. If you have any doubt, if you see a red flag, if you see too many of these, or if you just are really not comfortable making this call, assume acute risk. And what you do is you do not leave them alone and you maintain their safety. So it's not like you say, okay, yeah, go home, I'm going to call your parents and tell them to take you to the ER. No, it said, you don't even say, stay here while I go out of the room and call your parents. It's, you know, okay, can you come and sit here with this kid while I go and call their parents? You do not leave them alone, and you make sure that they are being taken to someplace to be assessed. And it might be that a formal assessment comes up deciding that they are not acute risk and sends them home. That's fine. You don't want to be the one that made that call and did not pass it on to a specialist. Too often people just decide not to bring up depression, suicide, any of those things. Okay, like I said, we really convey to people this idea that your pain is really kind of getting on my nerves. It makes me uncomfortable. It makes me feel like I should be cheering you up and I'm a failure, that I can't do that. That's what makes people stay silent. You know, when people minimize, you know, I'm feeling depressed. Oh, but everything's going so well in your world. You know, that's like the, I've got a poster somewhere of saying, why are you depressed? Everything, you've got such a good life. Is like turning to an asthmatic person and saying, why are you wheezing? There's plenty of oxygen in this room. Their lungs cannot access the oxygen available to them. They're gonna suffocate if we don't do something. This person's brain cannot access the pleasure, contentment, and satisfaction that may be right there around them, but their brain cannot access it right now. And if we do not get treatment, they could die from it. So we really want to emphasize and recognize that just deciding, oh, well, maybe if we just don't talk about it, it'll go away, is not the right answer. You know, and it puts on the depressed person this burden of, don't bring everyone down, pretend everything's fine, because that's what they want from me. They want me to cheer up, and I know I can't cheer up, but I can at least pretend I cheered up, and then they'll be more comfortable, and that's all I can accomplish right now. It's kind of the feeling a lot of people with depression have. So key points to take away and remember are that sadness and depression, different critters, okay? Sadness is a normal part of life. Depression is a malfunction in your brain chemistry, okay? But the more practice you have with processing sadness, the more resilient you may be when something really bad happens in your life, such that it doesn't have the opportunity to trigger a depressive episode. And there's, I think I've got a link to it, a really good video that is analyzing the Inside Out movie about this process of how the events in life can be converted into a depressive episode, okay? What you're looking for to know if you should be worried is change in function and persistence. You know, if it's not getting better, if it's actively getting worse, and it's interfering with function, it is worth doing something about it. You know, it's like if you see a kid who's limping and they're limping again today, that doesn't mean that you're going to throw them into a cast, but it's certainly worth looking at to find out, hey, what's going on? Limping is not something that you should have to be doing every day. And so saying to someone, hey, you seem to be really beating yourself up all the time these days. What's going on? Let's see what we can do about that. What we can do about that should be a combination, ideally, of therapy and meds. That has the best results, okay? And I don't have the stats for depression, but I can't imagine they're that different. But in anxiety world, if you take a person with anxiety and you give them therapy and meds, they get the most better. If you give them just therapy, they still get better. If you give them just meds, they still get better. Not as better as the combination. But after you stop the therapy, after you stop the meds, if they didn't have the therapy, they're more likely to resume the anxiety again. Meds alone, it'll make them better. And when the meds go away, they go back to baseline because they didn't learn anything about how to manage their emotions. Same thing here. You could give someone an antidepressant, and yes, it might alleviate the depression, but if they don't learn some skills for how to manage emotions, they are at a higher risk of becoming depressed again in the future. We want to emphasize that healing takes time. There is no off switch to this. And it is painful and it is exhausting. And the last thing a person needs is to feel like everyone resents them for doing it too slowly, okay? A very common feature is feeling like you should just not be around people because they're getting sick of this whole depression thing you've got going. So I can't not be depressed. So I guess the best I can do is spare them being around it. We need to actively, proactively, because that's what they'll be assuming is going on. We need to proactively address that and push back against that. I'm going to read the stuff in the chat at the end because I'm almost done. Okay. And you want to know what the warning signs for suicide are. Okay. Just going to review. There, I've got various links. Now, all of these links at the end, these slides to the end, there's no number for them because when you go to the material request sheet, there's just a checkbox. You just check the links at the end and it's these things, okay? So there's the links to safety things. This one's cool because the kid wakes up at 2 in the morning and they're like, well, what could I possibly do? Well, I'm not suicidal, so I'm not gonna call that. They just text this, and I texted it and chatted with the person to find out what kind of training do they have. I mean, they're not like psychologists or psychiatrists, but they do have training and they are there 24/7. You can text and they will chat with the person and be able to assess enough whether they really want to push that person to wake up their parent or otherwise seek more help. Okay, there's some really good resources out there and a nice easy 5 steps thing. There's lots of different links that are out there. Boggle the Owl is brilliant. That was on the suicide page. I love Boggle the Owl. Just about everything you get about Boggle is on Pinterest. Go there. If you find someone who's got like the best Boggle Pinterest page, read it, because Boggle is brilliant. The artist has not posted in 4 or 5 years, so that is distressing and sad. But this is the hyperbole and a half. The archive to depression, and someone read it aloud on YouTube. So if you want to just listen to it, you can do that too. Okay, and then I've got a bar here, so I can't even see what the last one is, but it's probably How to ADHD, because I always stick one of hers in there. Or actually, no, that'll be over here on videos. Okay, this is amazing. This link here, he's got other videos that are markedly less amazing, but this is just really good at describing what depression actually feels like. He really does an excellent job of describing it. Okay, and then there's a couple good things about the differences and so on. This is I forget what it's called. It's like a course. It's like rapid fire psychology topics, and this is their one about mood disorders. But it's really cool if you go there and you like it. Look at all their other ones too. I love this. This is from a philosophy program in England that talks about the importance of an unhappy adolescence. I highly recommend watching it because it talks about what are some of these things that are really miserable when you're an adolescent, but that actually serve a developmental function that help you become a better adult than you would be if you didn't go through them. I mean, most things that are, pain makes you stronger are really stupid. This one is kind of on the nose a lot. Okay. Yes, I do have the thing of analyzing inside out about it, and suggestions for feeling better that are not, this will just fix everything. And did anyone see, raise your hand if you watch Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Okay. This link comes and goes whether or not it works because it's a link to part of a TV show. But for those who didn't know what Buffy the Vampire Slayer is about, Buffy, she's a vampire slayer. There was a whole season where her mom had a neurological, like a tumor or something, and she survives it. And then at the end of one episode, Buffy comes home and her mother is lying on the couch having abruptly died of an aneurysm. And the next episode has been legitimately, by people who don't normally do anything science fiction-y, listed as among the best episodic television episodes ever made. And it's just about like the first 24 hours after a death and what the chaos is, the internal emotional chaos, and just the how to manage what's going on, and how all of Buffy's friends are trying to be supportive to her while also dealing with their own emotions, and how do you communicate and how do you manage your emotions. And a key thing in it that is brilliant that I do need to explain is because it's Buffy, there's various characters that are from fantasy world, and so one of them is Anya, who used to be a demon and is now made human. And so she's sort of the person who points out the weird things that she doesn't understand because she's not used to being human. And so she keeps blurting out the questions that people honestly think after a death, but that we know never to say, because that would just, it's not acceptable to say it. And so at one point, as one friend is, you know, trying to figure out what to wear and is on the edge of falling apart, Anya just says, "Are we going to see the body? I've never seen a dead body." And everyone just turns on her and say, "Would you stop saying stuff like that? You don't say stuff like that. That's awful. How could you say that?" And Anya, who, you know, she's not used to being human, she's like never shown emotion. She bursts into tears and starts crying and saying, "I don't understand what's happening. I don't understand. Joyce was a person yesterday, and now she's just gone. And she'll never do this and this and this again. And I don't understand how that's possible. And no one will explain it to me." And it's just, it's so brilliant, because that's what we all feel when we're faced with grief. It's that it makes no sense that this was a full person and now not. And no one will explain it to us, because none of us understand it, but we all kind of pretend that we do. So, so if you're ever dealing with grief and stuff, I highly, highly recommend watching that. I gotta pull myself back together for questions. Okay, and also apps. This one is a quick app where you set contacts, so that it's if you're feeling suicidal, you don't have to stop and think, who should I call? You decide that in advance, you touch that, and it's like, here's the number, want me to call them? So that it's kind of a streamline the calling, okay? This one is another one for setting up contacts and safety plans. It has more resources, but they're in the UK. And then T2 Mood Tracker is one that I recommend in a lot of places. It has slidey bars for various symptoms. It comes, I don't know if it's got depression in it. It's got anxiety and stress and head injury. But you can check your symptoms periodically, and then after like a couple weeks, it'll give you a graph of how they've changed. Because when you're caught up in a horrible day and feel like everything sucks and always has sucked, it's kind of good to be able to look and see what the trend has been, whether you have been gradually getting better. You can also set it up for whatever symptoms you'd like to be tracking instead. So what happens now for the next 25 minutes is I'm going to look at all the questions that were in chat and see what I can answer of those. If you have more questions, write them in chat, okay? I know some of you might have meetings you need to go to, so if you need to leave, that's cool. Stay as long as you like. If we go past noon talking, that's cool too. Yeah, there we go. Suicide prevention number for any city, or does each have its own? That is a nationwide number. The suicide prevention number is nationwide. I think one of the posters is actually a poster of it that has it on it too. If someone wants to watch it again, I recorded it. I hit record. Now, exactly how I can share recordings, that's on my to-do list to figure that out. Once I do, I will put it in the update. If you go to the material request sheet, you will end up on my mailing list, so you will get these weekly updates of when things are available. I highly recommend getting on the list. If you haven't been getting stuff and you thought you were on the list, it might be that your school email is bouncing. Go ahead and put in a private email. I'm taking all emails. You can glean away the private ones later when things go back to normal. You can also unsubscribe at any time. So if you want to get them for now, don't worry. I won't stalk you forever. And no matter how much I need money, I'm not going to sell your emails. Do not worry. I wouldn't know how to, and I wouldn't do it even if I did. Okay, do I potentially see an uptick in depression with middle school kids? Yeah, what I'm stunned by is the increasing numbers we're seeing in even younger kids, where we're seeing very young kids. And one problem we have is that kids are learning that certain phrases that they don't even know what it means get a very strong reaction. And it's so hard to distinguish between a kid who says, I just want to die, because if they say I'm really miserable, everyone goes, yeah, me too, I'm busy right now. But if they say I want to die, everyone stops and listens to them. From someone who actually knows what death is and thinks that it's a viable option, for a very broad definition of viable. Completely inappropriate definition of viable. Anyway, so yeah, it's really hard. And as they get older, the problem with teen and adolescent and child, the problem with the non-adult depressed people is that what you see with a lot of adult depression is a person who says, I want to get my life back. Or I want to have this adult life that I'm picturing. The kids, they can't picture an adult life because they've never had one. And so the key to keeping your feet planted on the planet when it really seems pointless is deciding that it will get better in the future. That's why a big thing for the LGBTQ community was the videos of it gets better, of having adults able to say, been there, felt that, and I can tell you, you will have an adult life if you make it that far that will be better than your current life. It's really hard to convey that to kids because they have a really hard time understanding it. There's also the fact that consequences, not something they're used to thinking about much, and impulsivity and so on. So you can have, with the kids, you get a lot more agony among the adults who are like, I should have done something, but when I was talking to him 6 hours before, he seemed fine and was talking about what he was doing that weekend and had no red flags, no indication whatsoever. And it's really hard to adjust to there was nothing you could do because he wasn't suicidal when you talked to him. And then when he was, he acted on it very impulsively. Someone's using the Q&A. I'm going to read the ones in chat first because I don't know what order things came in. It looked like about the same time. Okay, we got age 23, 8 out of 10 on diagnostic symptoms, many cognitive distortions, refusal of meds and therapy, has only left home a handful of times in 1.5 years. What to do? Ooh, yeah, that one's tough. That one's really tough. Start with having things that they have to do in the house. You know, requirement of that they have to be getting up, they have to be doing active things and some amount of constructive things and some amount of you do it just because it needs doing, not because you enjoy doing it. I mean, that's a big thing. Same as like when someone doesn't have an appetite but they need to eat anyway, you gotta say, look, the food is to be food. It's not to be a flavor sensation. It's there because it's food. You know, how often do you see someone who's dehydrated and they're like, I don't like that water, it's not cold. And you're like, okay, it only needs to be wet. For dehydration, you just need it to be wet. For nutrition, you just need it to be food. And for depression, you just need it to be activity without it being something that you enjoy doing. Because enjoyment might not be on the agenda. You need to be doing. And so the more we can do things, whether we're enjoying it or not, the more we can get to a place where we'll be able to start enjoying things. And so you start with some amount of activity. The next step will be you start to build in future goals. What kind of goals does a person want to have? And then you start saying, okay, what are the barriers to getting to those goals? And let's figure out ways to get over, under, through them. The person who put that there about the 23-year-old, email me and we can set up a time to talk because there's other stuff that I could send you, okay? Specifically, a lot of links to videos and stuff like that might be helpful. Let's see. Yeah, someone else was crying about Buffy. Yeah, I can't get through describing it. That's the least I've cried while describing that. Yeah, a person with several chronic health issues that struggles with, I just want to be normal. And yeah, it does really, really, really suck to have all these things. One thing that I frequently do whenever anyone refers to normal is I say, yeah, everyone is normal. For a broad enough definition of normal, we need to have a far broader definition of normal. You know, everybody is normal. Some people are more functional than others. Some people are good at some things and not so good at other things. Some people are really good at things that don't have much purpose and really bad at things that are totally necessary to daily life. And those are people that need to work on shifting that balance. But if you look at things in terms of function rather than normalcy, you know, what things can you do? What things can you not do? Okay, the things that you cannot do right now, what can you do to get better at doing as much of them as is feasible? And do not ignore the things that you can do, that you might be better than other people at. This idea that the only people who get to point at their successes are the people who have no deficits is really, really unfair and unrealistic. That just leads to everyone hiding their deficits so that they get to take credit for what they do well. Say, no, you can compliment the things you do well, you can work on the things you don't do so well, and or that your body does not do so well, and move forward with the life you have. It's a big, there are people who specialize in therapy for people with chronic illness, and a big part of it is, if you look up radical acceptance, radical acceptance and acceptance and commitment therapy are two wonderful things. Radical acceptance is, say, yeah, well, you don't have what you wish you had. How are you going to move forward with what you got? You know, it's letting go of the amount of energy you pour into desperately wishing for a different past and saying, okay, but what do you got? How do you move forward with what you got? And acceptance and commitment theory is brilliant. If I was going to go get trained to do primarily therapy, that's the modality that I would go get trained to specialize in. Because acceptance and commitment therapy says, okay, most therapy, people go into therapy with the idea of, I need to do the therapy, learn whatever, yada, 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 get the treatment to get rid of these symptoms. And when the symptoms are gone, then I get to have my good life. And acceptance and commitment therapy says, yeah, no, let's just assume you're never getting rid of those symptoms. Let's go ahead with the getting a good life now. Let's accept that you've got whatever symptoms you've got and commit to continuing to have a good life. Whether you have them or not, you're gonna go ahead and have a good life. So let's stop having everything be, yeah, as soon as I don't have any anxiety, then I'll live my life. Or as soon as I'm not depressed, then I'll live my life. Say, nope, you're depressed, might always be depressed. Hey, let's go do this. And as a side effect, and they have to bend over backwards to really emphasize, it isn't a sneaky target effect. It really is a side effect. Generally, symptoms do go down, but it's not because it's a backdoor way to reduce the symptoms. Their goal is not symptom reduction. Their goal is ignore the symptoms and get on with life. Because as life fills up more of your life, it squeezes out the symptoms a little bit. So symptoms become less central to your identity and your consciousness and your awareness, and thus they become less. So also that person, you can call me or show up at the meeting if you want, and we can chat. Someone said their son's psychologist asked like that. I'm guessing maybe they asked the bad way. I don't remember. Let's see. Okay, someone refused. I'm assuming they refused to watch the 13 Reasons Why. It was giving youth the green light. Seems to romanticize so hugely, completely. And I have to say, every year, McLean does this big dinner thing for all their donors, and they highlight a few programs that the hospital has, and then they have a guest of honor who has to be someone famous, who does something that is supportive of mental health. Usually it's they acknowledge their cousin publicly or something like that. And they come and they talk. And last year they had, what's her face, who was the executive producer of it. And I was like, I'm not okay with this. She should not be getting honored by the premier mental health treatment facility in the country, because that show did more damage than anything in recent memory. It was a loving postcard to the idea of, yes, you're right, they will be sorry. This is the way to teach all of them a lesson. And the way it's structurally built, if you've ever watched it, it alternates between flashbacks to when she's alive and the current life. And the way they transition between them is so artsy. You kind of feel like she's there watching the current life, which is exactly what every suicidal teen wants. To be able to commit suicide and then hang out, haunt, and watch everybody have learned their lesson and feel terribly, terribly sorry about you. And then just as frosting on that basic underlying structure of it, they also completely make fun of any possibility of getting any help from any adult. They completely ridicule that. Many, many episodes, one person finally goes to the counselor for help, and the counselor basically would get arrested. Basically says, oh, well, you just have to get over that sexual assault. There's nothing we can do about it. without reporting anything to anyone. You know, basically, yeah, no, that's not what anyone would do. But everything is, yeah, there's nothing any adult could do, so don't even bother talking to an adult. And then the actual suicide is an art house movie. And they're like, oh, we wanted to show it to show how awful it is. I'm like, yeah, would that everyone's bathroom was such a painting. You know, it was just, oh. Yes, it was very, very bad. All right, so someone wanted to say, what's the best way to confirm that a teenager is going through depression? Talk to them, you know, ask them what's going on. The number one hallmark of depression, I mean, when they talk about the top 2 symptoms, one of them being a sad, persistently sad mood, I think the anhedonia is the really, really strong one. Anhedonia is the everything sucks. Nothing is fun. Nothing is funny. Nothing is pleasurable. Nothing is worth being here for. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Everything tastes bad. Nothing is amusing. I get no pleasure out of anything I do. And here's the real kicker, okay? When you remember something happy, okay, if you think back to a really happy day in your life and you're like, oh yes, that was that, or someone you remember a joke and you start to laugh, part of your experience of remembering it is based on the serotonin flying around for you to feel that happiness again. So depression, not only by reducing the serotonin in your brain and increasing your pain centers, it not only takes away any pleasure you might have from your current experiences, it paints all your past pleasurable experiences gray. You try to remember what happy felt like before when you used to be happy, and it's not there. You can't feel it anymore. It's like your brain is gaslighting yourself into deeply believing that, yeah, you've never been happy. You'll never be happy. Happy is just something you can't even imagine because you try to imagine it. You can't imagine it because you don't have the neurochemicals to imagine it. So that's what I really look for is, can you get pleasure out of anything? You know, can you get any kind of pleasure out of doing anything? And then it becomes, if they're like, yeah, I went with my friends and it was really fun, but man, when I'm home with my parents, I just want to die. Then you're like, okay, how can we keep the pleasure of the friends in your awareness so you don't ignore it when you're upset? That you can remember that that is an option. I felt good yesterday, I'm going to feel good tomorrow. I just need to get through today intact to get there. And so if they're like, no, there's nothing gives me pleasure, then you're starting several steps even earlier than that, where you need to, that person really, really should have meds. That person really, really needs something to help get the serotonin going. Because if they can't feel pleasure, it's going to be really hard for them to get the brain to upregulate the serotonin just through behavior and thought. I mean, it can, but it's going to take a very long time. And it's a lot of work with virtually no payoff. And so that's a lot to ask of anyone to do without any help. And so, I mean, yeah, I guess I do end up being very pro-med, but mostly it's because so many people are really anti-med. And it's, I really want you to think what you're giving up by taking that off the table. Thank you, whoever was reminding people about how the code works. Let's see, I'm seeing if there's any other questions here. Okay, wait. Yes, people asking about the code and being told you do the evaluation and that gives you the code. Your attendance is logged by Zoom. Zoom tells me that you were here and when you left. So you don't have to get anything from me to prove that you were here. Zoom takes care of that. Okay, let's see. Does your information include the text number? Yes, if you click links at the end, it includes that page with all the numbers on it too. And maybe I'll just put links in the upper corner, because I used to have a number there, and then people put the number in, and then I get confused about whether they want that or what. Because people are putting wacky things on the request sheet. They're putting numbers that don't exist, and I don't know what to do. Do students transition when leaving a long-term hospitalization? Yeah, that's a fun one. Put number 5 in the material request sheet. Number 5 on all my presentations is a packet for transitioning back to school after hospitalization and how to manage that. The mood tracker app, put down click off links and you'll be able to see it, or you can just write down T3, I think it's T3 mood tracker. Just Google it and you'll find it. All the apps that I list are generally free, because I'm not about to spend money on something that I don't have time to screen anyway. So let me see, what other questions were there? I know I saw one somewhere. Can you tell us how to support a student in a brief visit who is often melancholy? Look happy to see them. Tell them that you value the time you spend with them. Tell them that you notice that they seem sad, without it being a, this is something you need to do different if you want to keep seeing me kind of tone to it that people get. You know, because frequently it's like, oh yeah, it's good to see you. I wish you weren't sad all the time when you're here. The kid's going to hear that as, yeah, you should stop coming here when you're sad. If they're always sad, you just slam the door in their face. So what you want to do is say, yeah, I'm really glad you come. You know, I've noticed that you're often sad when you're here. And I wonder how you feel about that. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about while you're here? But you want to make sure that the number one thing is making it clear to them that you are happy that they're coming, that you value seeing them, that they're worth seeing. And ask them that they look sad when they come, when they're there, and you've noticed this, because that's the other thing, is that the person walking around who's sad all the time and no one says anything feels totally invisible, like no one gives a shit that they're sad. It's also possible that they're not actually sad. They might be like, what? No, I'm not sad. You know, we've all heard of a resting bitch face. Some of us have just kind of, actually mine is more angry, but lots of people, they might look sad if they're not actively smiling, or they look angry if they're not actively smiling. And so you want to check and say, you know, I've noticed that when you come here, you often look like you're sad. I was wondering if anything's going on that you want to talk about. That would be my approach. Hard part, of course, is finding time in your office when you can have a conversation like that without other people walking in. Let's see, Bell and that. How do you talk to kids who are watching 13 Reasons Why about the problems? On the material request sheet, and anyone can do this, the last question on, okay, it's got like who you are and what subject was and the thing about the certificate, and then it's got a box for putting in the numbers of the thing you want. And then the last one is, right here, anything else I told you to write. If you put 13 Reasons Why essay in there, I'll send you the newsletter that I wrote when that sucker came out, because when that came out, I was desperately avoiding watching it. And then there was a school that was going to do a parents panel, and they wanted me on the panel, so I had to watch it. And then they didn't even have the panel, so I put myself through 13 hours of really, really upsetting, frustrating anger and pain. And it wasn't for nothing, because it is important for me to have seen it, so I can tell you how really, really, really bad it is. So I detail in that what's wrong with it. In general, if you see a kid who's into something that we think is a really bad idea, you gotta avoid coming at it with a, this is bad, because they are going to immediately default to, well, then I will tell you what's good about it. You know, it's basically, you've outlined for them, there's two opposing sides, this is my side, and they'll be like, oh, okay, I guess I take the other side. Okay, that's a problem, because then they're going to be articulating and reinforcing everything they like about it in order to debate and play tug of war with you about what's bad about it. If instead you say, so how are you feeling watching that? What are you thinking about when you're watching that? And actually have a dialogue about it. When they say they like this part, you can say, oh yeah, I can see how that part's good and what parts do you not like, and let me tell you the parts I like and the parts I do not like. I mean, the acting is wonderful in it. Okay, the casting's a little bit weird. I'm not sure what town it's supposed to be set in where every 16-year-old has multiple tattoos, but aside from that, it's, if you can say there are good sides and bad sides to everything, it's a lot easier for the kid to acknowledge the bad sides, and you want them to, you know, identify those. It's really hard because it's sometimes it's that they don't have other information about it, you know, and you could say, you know, it came out long enough ago that you can pull the old fart card and say, well, you know, when it first came out, this and this and this happened. And you can work it in kind of quietly, because when they stream it now, it has warnings on it that it did not have the first time. And finally, the current streamable version, I think, does not actually show the suicide. It took them 2 years of including the suicide before they decided to retroactively say that they'd always agreed with the idea that maybe they shouldn't show that. And so if you say, you know, I worry about what impact it might have on people, and the kid's like, well, it says right there, the warning, you can say, oh yeah, you know, when it first came out, they didn't have that warning, and then they had to add it because of all the kids who copycatted and had suicide attempts. And there were not there were several completed suicides. Oh, a thing about terminology that I meant to mention before, so anyone who's still here, spread this meme. Do not use the term committed suicide. It's a common term, so it's really hard to remember and catch yourself. People commit crimes, okay? So saying someone committed suicide is very much lumping them in as a crime, as opposed to something that happened, you know, something that, yes, they did, but it would be far more appropriate to say, like, they died by suicide, or they completed a suicide, to distinguish from suicide attempt to a completed suicide. So, but yes, there was a study a year or so ago that cranked the numbers and discovered that they could, I forget exactly how they did the stats on it, but I remember it was one of those where you just kind of go, wow, statisticians sometimes are really cool people. Managed to isolate variables enough to show that that show alone was responsible for a specific increase in suicides that year. And it was just, so yeah, incompleted suicides, not just attempts, because attempts are much harder to count. So yeah, but I'll send you the essay, and they'll give you some more of the details that you could say, you know, hey, yeah, I hear you. And what about this? And what do you think about this? And what do I think about that? You got to look hard and find anything positive you can say about it, or anything relatable you can say about it. But you do want to also, and the other thing is, if you're coming at it saying, I think it's bad for you, that's another thing that makes the kids go, no, it isn't, it's mine. And so you could say, wow, I really worry about someone who isn't as perceptive as you, who might get this kind of message out of it. Because that way, if they've been getting that kind of message out of it, you set it up as you're perceptive enough to know that you shouldn't take that takeaway. And now that they hear it, if they've been starting to take it, they'd be like, ooh, I was getting tricked. Maybe I shouldn't take that takeaway. So, but yeah, it is hard. My daughter watched it, and she's got an essay in that newsletter as well, because she told me that I was too old to write the essay and it should be written by a peer. But she also wrote very pointedly about the experience of watching it, because she'd been told it was good and been told that it was relatable and a positive thing for people who have had depression or suicidal thoughts to watch in order to better understand and deal with their mental health issues. And she got blindsided by how incredibly toxic and painful and triggering it was. So, so yeah, it's nasty. Okay. Let's see, any other questions? Looking for any other questions. People mostly seem to just be saying thank you or whatever. So if there's a question that you asked in chat and I didn't answer it, ask it again because I can't find it. Or otherwise, if there are no more questions, I will go ahead and stop it. You're going to do the evaluation and the material request. If you think of a question, you can always call or email me, and or you can come to the open meetings that are on Tuesdays and Thursdays. The badge show is called 13 Reasons Why. So put that in the final box on the material request, and I will send y'all I'll send you just that whole newsletter from that year so you can see what presentations I was doing way back when and whatever. But that's just easier than just sending part of it. So someone says they're trying to do the SurveyMonkey evaluation. It should work. I have clicked on it and it goes through. Sometimes if it doesn't work, it might be, I think it likes Chrome better than Netscape or whatever the other browser is. So if you're not using a Chrome browser and SurveyMonkey is not playing nice with you, see if you can try it again with a Chrome browser. SurveyMonkey also makes an app. Not sure how easy it is. It should be not that hard to also get to it on your phone if you try that. So I've got people raising their hand and I don't know why. So maybe they're just waving. They're just stretching. Yeah, they're just stretching. So, so let's see. Okay. So if there's any other questions, you know where to find me, you know how to reach me. If you are from elsewhere in Massachusetts or elsewhere in the country, welcome, yay. I'm trying to get my program, get people enrolled pretty much across the state now. Because it's supposed to be going statewide if it gets funding. If it does, it'll be nice to have the groundwork laid. If it doesn't, well, then I'll do what I can for the next, 11 months that I exist and try to help as many people as I can. So, and someone's still having trouble with their SurveyMonkey evaluation. I think I'd really be getting pestered by lots and lots of people if it was something that I could fix. So I'd say all the usual things that, like shutting everything off and then turning it all back on again. I don't know. Isn't it weird how that's what we've decided is the only solution to anything? So 3 engineers are in a car, okay? There's a mechanical engineer, a chemical engineer, and a computer engineer. And the car breaks down. And the mechanical engineer says, it must be the engine. Let's go fix the engine. And the chemical engineer says, no, it must be the gas we bought from that really kind of shady gas station isn't very good. So let's get better gas into it. And the computer engineer says, hey, I know, let's all get out and get back in and see if it works then. Because that's what we do with computers. So, okay. Sorry, I can't help with anything else. And there are no other questions. So I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. And I will see you all later. Bye-bye.